Well, howdy doody do to you. It is our 10th lesson on social movements. Sociologists, let us begin. Today's learning goals are, you're going to know the 4 stages of a social movement. So last time we looked at the first 2, emergence and coalescence. Today we're going to look at bureaucratization and decline. And you're also going to be able to analyze. Right, stage 3, bureaucratization. Bureaucratization, the word bureau means office in French, so it's about making it all official and organized and structured and whatnot. Okay, so in the 3rd stage, your social movement is highly organized. It has formal positions as leaders. It's not just that they emerge, it's that they've got actual titles. They might even be getting paid. Ching. You've had some success. And you use a variety of means, not just through protests and really charismatic leaders, a number of different ways to achieve the social movement's goals. And you start using formal political strategies. Maybe you might be trying to lobby the government to change a law, something like that. It's a very crucial stage in the success of the movement. This is where most of the success or failure happens. This determines what kind of decline you see in your social movement. But at this stage, as I say, because it's so crucial, you might dilute the original goals. People might find, oh, it's too hard to go with the original goal. Let's water it down and go for that goal instead. So very critical. And a lot of social movements try to work within existing institutions. However, those existing institutions are set up so that they might not be able to accommodate some new social movements, some of the goals that they have. So there's often going to be a conflict, not just between what the original goals of the social movement are, whether it's possible to achieve them, but also working within existing institutions can be a problem, because part of your social movement or the social change that you're trying to carry out might be to break down or challenge those institutions. So working within the system when you're trying to smash it can be a problem. So, for example, Greenpeace is in the bureaucratization stage of its social movement. It now has an official headquarters, and here it is, this fancy building in Amsterdam. Yeah. Great PowerPoint skills there, Mr. Lawless. Okay, stage 4, decline. Now, decline, remember, doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. Social movements don't usually continue on for infinity. They usually have some kind of decline, so they either succeed or fail or whatever. So there are 5 ways that sociologists think that a social movement can end. The first way is through repression. So it declines, it ends because the powers, the authority crushes the movement. Yeah, like a lot of the protests in Hong Kong where they were trying to stop China from having that extradition law, where they protested for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. The Chinese government has repressed it, and you could argue that it's declined because of that. So the authorities shut it down. It's more likely for a decline to happen through repression if a social movement is revolutionary. Yeah, think ISIS. ISIS got shut down through repression, but it wasn't the authorities, it was like the military of various countries. The second way that a social movement can decline is through co-optation. That's where they kind of steal the ideals. So, for example, leaders leave or get influenced by the outside. Now, the example that I've offered in class a number of times is, for example, and this is not a social movement, this is just an example of co-opting. You've got like your 18-year-old techno whiz kid who hacks into the FBI website and puts a picture of a giant poo on their homepage or something, and the FBI goes, ooh, they find out who did it. Now, they could put that guy in jail, or what they could do is hire him to come and work for cybersecurity for the FBI, which is you see every now and then. Yep. So instead of that kid wanting to shut down the FBI, he's now working for the FBI. So you quite often find authorities in response, well, not often, but you sometimes find authorities in response to social movements going, How can we dampen the power of this social movement? I know what we can do. We can offer the leader $1 million a year job to come and work for us instead. And sometimes greedy leaders might go, okay, I'll do it. Or you might find that leaders themselves become corrupt and use the power for their own interests. For example. Oh, there is no example. Anyway, so here are the stages. Yep. Emergence, coalescence, bureaucratization, and then you've got those 5 reasons. We're going to come to the last few now. So, carrying on with the reasons why it might decline. The third one is decline through failure. Straight up, your social movement fails. So why might it fail? Here's a number of reasons. Maybe you've got crap leaders. Maybe people just like, don't care about it anymore. Maybe you run out of money. Maybe there's internal conflicts. Who knows? They're all possible reasons why it might just straight up fail. Decline through becoming mainstream, which means that the social change that you're trying to bring about happens anyway, but possibly not because of your social movement. So no longer needed. Yeah. If the whole of society moves towards some kind of social change, irrelevant of your social movement isn't needed, but the social change has already happened, so it's all good. Classic example of this is in the age cohorts. You often find older people much more conservative, younger people much more liberal and progressive, and so they might start social movements to try to make some kind of socially progressive thing happen, when actually what happens over time is that all of the old people who are against that die out, who are then replaced with even more young people, and then the change just simply happens. For example, homophobia used to be a lot more common in school settings. I know don't get me wrong, I know it's still there now, but when I was a high school student, homophobia was rife, and speaking about homosexual people in a negative way was just a daily occurrence. Was there a social movement that changed that? Maybe. But being less homophobic has certainly become more mainstream. It's not as widespread as it needs to be, I'm not saying that, but there's definitely been a big social change there, and whether a social movement was required, you could argue no. Yeah, the younger generation. Okay, finally we have decline through success. Yay, that's when your social movement actually achieves the social change, or rolling back the social change, or resisting the social change, or it achieves its goals. It is rare. But, for example, gay marriage in Australia. Marriage equality now exists. Gay couples are allowed to get married just like straight couples. They have the same human rights as everybody else. Now, there's a video that I want you to watch, but I'm not going to put it on here because it's got a lot of swearing in it, which would be wrong for a teacher to suggest. But if you want to check it out, if you like, I love these things anyway. Honest government ad on YouTube. If you Google plebiscite honest government ad, it's a 2-minute fake ad about the plebiscite. It's hilarious. I highly recommend you check it out. But I'm not putting it on this video. Okay. So, here we go. Once again, protesters have failed to get their message across. Think, why is that funny? Here was the celebrations in the streets in Australia after the gay marriage law was passed. I'm trying to figure out where that is. It looks like it might be Sydney. I don't know. This was the vote in Parliament. So everybody decided to move to one side of the room to signify that they were voting yes for the marriage equality bill, and then you got these people here who voted against it. Yeah. Quite a few, there was probably about another 10 MPs who abstained, so they didn't vote at all, because they didn't want to vote against it, because their constituents voted for it, but they couldn't bring themselves to vote for marriage equality. Barnaby Joyce, I'm looking at you, mate. You're a disgrace to Kiwis. Okay, so here we go, marriage equality. This is how all the different states voted. So it was 61% yes, 38% no overall. And so you could probably say, yeah, so Victoria's quite considerably more progressive in terms of marriage equality and gay rights than New South Wales is. There you go, interesting. Okay, it's activity time. We are analysing. Analysing, as you well know, means to define, describe separate parts, explain the relationship between those parts, and then discuss related issues. So I want you to draw a link between the possible purposes and the reasons for decline. Okay? So here we go. On the left, there are 3 possible purposes for a social movement: carry out social change, resist it, or roll it back. There are 5 reasons why a social movement might decline. Draw a link between any of these things on the left and any of these things on the right. Just pick one of each and write at least 4 or 5 sentences explaining how that could come about. So maybe there was a social movement that wanted to resist social change and it succeeded. Tell me a little story about what that might look like. Our first video is about the history of repression of radical social movements. Very interesting. Look at this.
Welcome everyone back to the Real News Network. I'm Jared Ball here in Baltimore. As we move into Black History Month, we wanted to sit down with our resident political prisoner and Black Panther Party producer and host here at the Real News, Marshall Eddie Conway, to talk a little bit about his life and work, and particularly about his book, The Greatest Threat, the Black Panther Party and the Counterintelligence Program. Eddie, welcome back to the Real News.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So let's talk about this in the context of Black History Month, again, which is just started here a little bit ago in February. Why is a focus on the greatest threat, the Black Panther Party and the Counterintelligence Program, so important?
Well, I think it's important in light of the current events with the Black Lives Matter movement and Black Radical Tradition Conference and a host of other kind of Black organizing and activities that's currently sweeping across America. Young people, I believe, has an interest now in what the Black Panther Party was, what happened to it, and why it happened. And I think this book, The Greatest Threat, kind of gives an overview of what the Black Panther Party was. It also gives an understanding of how it was attacked and why it was attacked. And in addition, it also highlights a number of people that end up either dead or in prison to become political prisoners, or in exile to become political refugees. And I think all of that's relevant to our history today.
So let's just quickly go back and talk a little bit about what was or is the Counterintelligence Program.
Well, the Counterintelligence Program was a program operated by the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover deemed in 1968 that the Black Panther Party was the greatest internal threat to America, and it mandated a group of people within the FBI to organize a counterintelligence program that would sabotage the Black Panther Party's organizing, it would sabotage their image, and it would either run them out of the country or jail them legally or illegally. That program then had access to all the different police and law enforcement apparatuses throughout the United States, from the state levels, the state police, the federal levels, the internal revenue, all the way down to the local police departments. It used informers, it uses agent provocateurs, it even used military personnel to spy on the Black Panther Party and then to engage in activities that Congress later determined was illegal to sabotage the operations in the various states that the Black Panther Party existed in.
I think it's also important to note that, as it was pointed out in the Freedom Archives documentary, COINTELPRO 101, that everything that was done then that was illegal is now currently legal under the Patriot Act and other more modern changes to the law and this whole notion of homeland security. So I would think that it's an important lesson to learn going back to the history that you experienced, given that all that was done to you illegally is now perfectly legal. And of course, it wasn't just to the Black Panther Party, right? It was, Hoover started his whole operation attacking Marcus Garvey. And then, of course, the COINTELPRO went against not only the Black Panthers, but the Native American movement, the Chicano movement, anarchists, socialists, communists, etc., creating exile, political imprisonment, and assassination. So when you talk about Black Lives Matter today and other activists and other newly formed efforts, what else might they want to consider as maybe preparation to deal with what you all had to deal with that was, again, illegal, but is now legal? You know.
Mm-hmm. And I guess one of the points is, like, way past the Patriot Act, which came in after 9/11, now there's something called the National Defense of American Act, which allows the president the power to make any citizen in America disappear without any legal recourse whatsoever, without any constitutional rights, and the Bill of Rights is suspended once a letter of recommendation is signed against an individual or a group, and that whole group can disappear or that individual can disappear, and there's no recourse whatsoever. So people today probably need to be aware, especially now that surveillance is not only ever present in terms of the telephone, the cameras and computers and et cetera, but I think today's people need to be aware of something that we tend not to pay too much attention to, and that's agent provocateurs. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, not even agent provocateurs anymore, undercover police that operates now with the mandate that it's legal to go into groups and spy on groups. It's legal. It's no longer illegal. They can even encourage activities that used to be entrapment, now is like just finding out where a person's intentions are. Mm-hmm. There's a number of cases across the country now, especially in the Muslim communities, but there's also cases in terms of immigration. There's cases in terms of the animal rights movement. There's cases in terms of the environmentalist movement, where people have been actually framed up or coerced into saying this or that and eventually locked up. And there's a number of political prisoners from all of those movements now in jail today. So people have to be careful how they organize and be careful who they organize with, and try to organize within the boundaries where they won't allow agent provocateurs to encourage any kind of activities that might lead to their arrest.
So we talked a little bit off air, as we were setting up to do this interview, about this claim that the Panther Party was the greatest threat to national security of the United States. You have a quote in here from Dhoruba bin Wahad, former Black Panther Party, Black Liberation Army member, talking about what actually caused the threat, that it wasn't just the guns or the claims of violence or even notion of socialist politics, but very simple day-to-day programs that you all were running in the community. Could you talk a little bit about this claim, again, why they would focus on the Panthers as the greatest threat?
Well, I think the threat was the ideology. I mean, this was the first probably national organization in the Black community that espoused socialism, was anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, and we put programs down on the ground, whether it was free breakfast programs or free health clinics or buses to the prison or community control, and that showed how we could organize in a socialist way and take care of ourselves and our community and use those resources in a collective kind of way. This idea and those programs resonated in other communities. In the Latino communities, the Brown Berets sprung up. In the Puerto Rican community, the Young Lords sprung up. In the Native American community, the American Indian movement sprung up. In the white community, the White Panther Party and the Patriot Party sprung up. And then around the world at that time, there was a Black Panther Party sprung up in Israel. There was a Black Panther Party sprung up in Australia. Black Panther Party sprung up in Africa. Black Solidarity groups sprung up in Asia. And the proliferation of this ideology was what the government was in fear of, because it was not just a black radical movement leading this, but working with Asians, brown people, white people, Native Americans, and so on. And this is what the government feared: the unity of all these people and the recognition that they all had a common problem and a common foe.
Let me ask you, in the few minutes we have left, we were also talking off camera a little bit about the popular imagery related and symbolism related to the Black Panther Party, specifically around some of the imagery in the Super Bowl performance of Beyonce and some of the way her dancers were dressed with the afros and the berets and the bandolier and all. How do you respond to that? When you talk to young people who might see a snapshot of an image like that or a symbol like that, what is it that you would like them to know, or that you tell them about these symbols and how they relate to the actual party itself?
Well, the first thing is, I think, and this is the bottom line basic idea, is theory and practice. You know, you can look and sound like anybody, and people do look and sound like anybody, but the determination of what's real and what's not is the practice. You have to look and see what those people are actually doing. And if those people are just making money, or if those people are just entertaining people, or if those people are just there as a misdirection, then you realize that they are not genuine revolutionaries. They're not trying to change the conditions. They're trying to make a living, and they're trying to put people to sleep. So I think it's important to recognize theory and practice, because if you say all of this, but you're not doing anything, then that's really the bottom line. You're not doing anything.
Well, Marshall Eddie Conway, thank you for joining us for this segment of The Real News and talking with us a little bit about your book, The Greatest Threat, The Black Panther Party and the COINTELPRO, and COINTELPRO, and for being a greatest threat to talk about the greatest threat. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us here at The Real News. Again, for all involved, I'm Jared Ball here in Baltimore, saying, as always, as Fred Hampton used to say, to you we say peace if you're willing to fight for it. So peace, everybody, and we'll catch you in the whirlwind.
And a good news video. Success of the Australian Marriage Equality Bill in Parliament. And then they sing a song. It's beautiful.
Oh, up the doors. As there are fewer than 5 members on the side for the noes in this division, I declare the question resolved in the affirmative in accordance with Standing Order 127. The names of those members who are in the minority will be recorded in the votes and proceedings. The Clerk.
Third reading, a bill for an act to amend the law relating to the definition of marriage and protect religious freedoms and for related purposes.
That's it. That's it.
Okay, reflection activity. In your exercise book, write reflection activity, and we're going to do a PMI, a plus, minus, interesting. So thinking about the decline of social movement and those 5 reasons, or those 5 possible reasons for decline. What's 1 plus? What's 1 minus? And what's 1 interesting? Homework times. Read the relevant 2 pages from your textbook. And I want you to spend 15 minutes on this vocab quiz. You're going to be all over the vocab. There's the link there, bit.ly/year 12 sociology words. Do that one. Thanks heaps for participating in this lesson, and as I always like to say, keep it real.